Okay, the first question for today's World Cafe is, would producers benefit from more flexibility in how they use the cannabis growing area? And would someone like to get started? Do you have any thoughts or ideas on this first question we're considering today?
Hi, this is Micah. I guess I have more of a question in trying to just understand a little better what we're getting at. What kind of flexibility are we talking about in, because like my understanding is it's the area that there is a plant in. So I guess I don't quite understand what the question is getting at as far as flexibility. Like, could you give some examples of the sorts of things that you're imagining might want to be done that are currently prohibited, or I don't quite get it.
Well, we had feedback where people said that measuring canopy is the wrong measurement. So, you know, we're considering. I would like to explore what the other possibilities are if we had some other way of regulating, whether it be a yield limit, something of that sort. That would take, that would relieve the question of all these sort of different interpretations, I guess, that we have in, regarding how empty space is used. So I'm just hoping for discussion of what, if there's a, you know, if producers could realize a benefit in their methods or in their business operations from having a different way of regulating the amount of product they produce.
Gotcha.
Okay. Thanks. So there's no expectation behind this. We're just hoping to have a discussion about modernizing these rules. So does anyone have any other ideas? Do we have any producers with us today? I mean, I know you are, Micah, but.
This is Matthew here. I'm also a producer. I actually was curious. Micah kind of asked what I was curious about too. I wasn't sure what the intent was with maybe changing the way you can use grow area, but I see what you're saying now about changing the way you maybe define canopy. I know we've discussed it a little bit, me and some other growers, and you know, I hear what you're saying. There's people saying we need a different way of measuring it, but I don't know that going to a gross amount or a growth weight is necessarily going to fix our problem. Because however you really look at that, you're either going to cut down indoor growers' size in order to be growing the same amount as sun growers, or you're going to allow sun growers to grow way more, which is actually going to further exacerbate the problem we have with overproduction in general. I would say we maybe just further define canopy more stringently as opposed to changing it from canopy, I guess.
You're muted, Jeff.
Sorry. So what you're saying is that canopy is really the correct measurement, but we just have to have consistency in how it's applied.
Yeah, and maybe a really strong definition for it, so it can't really be, so it's not like up for interpretation per se. But I don't know. I feel like if we go to a certain kind of weight, that's going to almost create more of a problem than we have already with overproduction. And unless you're really going to cut down in, I don't know. I just don't know how that would really work. And then you're going to have people wanting to have only their A grade stuffed into whatever that weight is, and then there's going to be a bunch of leftover weight. I just feel like that'll create more problems than maybe just fine tuning the current way.
Now, Matthew, would you say that, that growers now, do you, in your experience, do a lot of producers produce close to the actual sort of potential, what the, if they could grow at, 99% efficiency, if everything went right and they maximize their canopy space, do you think there are many growers that even approach that sort of growing to their full potential, or what the upper limit of their what their production operation would look like?
I would say there's a lot of sun growers that are probably growing as much as they can, growing are meeting their upper limits. Indoor, I don't know how many indoor operations have only fully built out 30,000 square feet of lights. It's pretty big.
Right.
But I do think there's a lot of sun growers that are certainly they're already. I know we're already hitting. I mean, without going into numerous crops and trying to run greenhouses through longer season, we pretty much max out our 30, but we control our 30 really well too. We don't blast way over that mark.
Mm-hmm.
What about plant count as a way to measure?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Cassidy. Does anyone have?
That'd be extremely difficult because you got every plant's going to yield different depending on. I mean, that'll just push everyone into a certain style of growing in essence. Because it'd be just like the medical days when you had a limit of how many plants, then you grew. Say you only could grow 15 plants, then it was like, well, we're going to make each plant 15 pounds, if you could, grow trees, and that actually just makes it harder on farmers than being able to grow a canopy space. I think canopy like square footage is probably the correct method. I mean, just my opinion personally. I don't see how regulating through plant number would be beneficial at all to farmers, because they would just end up growing bigger plants, which would actually be harder for certain farmers than other farmers, depending on their setup right now.
Well, that makes sense. Okay, thanks.
This is Payne with Sunco, and I would suggest looking at Colorado because they use plant count. So they've been in it for a while. I'm sure there's lessons learned there.
And with Colorado, they do a analysis to increase your plant count based on your production yields. So I'm sure there's data out there to assess that.
Well, it kind of also eliminates methods of growing. You got some guys going to grow sea of green, some guys are going to grow a screen of green. All these things are different plant numbers per square foot, right? And so if you stick it to a plant number, then you're really going to affect some guys that like to grow sea of green methods. It just eliminates certain kind of methods of growing, which wouldn't be that beneficial to growers.
Okay, yeah.
This is Marcus from Edgemont Group. I think just to piggyback on that point, right? If we go on plant count, we are going to just gravitate towards our highest yielding strains, and that's probably just going to it's going to make weed more and more commodified. There's not going to be as much choice for consumers. There's not going to be as much strain choice, and it's going to push a lot of people just creating more and more distillate and more kind of certain product type, from these like really high yielding strains. So I would echo that.
Marcus, if they're gravitating towards higher producing strains, that would probably really diminish the type of the types of cannabis that would be predominant on the market, right? It would favor more indica type, heavier yielding strains.
Yeah, I think so. I think it would limit customer choice at the end.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of times your best genetic is actually a lower yielding strain. It's very common for like the stinkiest one of the batch to be a lower yielder one.
Yeah.
Pheno.
Yeah. Yeah. So that would be, so if you find the one that you think is the most interesting, or the most has the best genetics, it might not be it wouldn't be necessarily the one that you would put into production, though, because although it might be unique, it might not produce enough to make it worthwhile,
Yeah,
growing that instead of something that's very heavy.
right. Because in a square footage scenario, you can just cram more plants in that space to make sure you still get a fair representation of weight on that genetic. If you eliminate that option, then you would pretty much probably eliminate a lot of those kinds of genetics.
Okay. So if there was a different way of limiting the or regulating the total production besides canopy, then say a grower that had adequate space could spread out and grow more unusual or lower yielding plant, and still, if they had more space, maybe they could grow hypothetically the same amount of product that someone with a smaller footprint would grow if they grew stuff that was heavier producing.
Well, yeah, I mean, right now it's everyone's choice. We have our canopy and we choose to grow ones that are maybe less yielding because they're better product. But I don't know that allowing necessarily more space would fix the current problem anyway.
Yeah.
I think it's helpful. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's helpful if the bigger the potential change of something that you're considering, the more flexibility you have on implementation. So this thing could have the potential to drastically change a lot of businesses. So in that case, if you make it optional, you can see the first year what happens. And then get feedback from people that actually did it.
I think another thing, just pulling back a little bit more, like, have we defined the problem? I think we've mentioned the problem. I think there's assumptions about the problem, but is there a clear-cut kind of statement of what problem we're trying to solve with either the current canopy rules or kind of what we're trying to head to?
We have a lot of stakeholder interest from all perspectives about re-examining these rules. So the intent behind these World Cafes is to evaluate evaluate how the rule is working and if it needs to be modernized, and if the method of regulation by canopy is really the correct measure. So this is a way that we're looking at some regulatory updating and looking to see if there's a better way that we can write the rules so that we have the best outcome. So we're not bringing any preconceived idea into this. We wanted to open this up because we knew that there was so much stakeholder interest in it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I guess I've just heard the problem defined different ways. I've heard diversion, I've heard overproduction, I've heard fairness. That's kind of, I guess, what I'm trying to understand before I kind of present some more ideas.
Okay.
I think it'd be a good idea to map some of your goals to like Biden's marching orders, and his was trafficking. Like the word he used was trafficking. So if you start mapping to that, it might help guide some of the changes that you look at, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Just my perspective on the sort of problem and how we got here was that there was inconsistency in enforcement about what canopy meant, and that what we really need is, out of this whole process of evaluating production limits, is a really clear and consistent and easily applied actionable definition of canopy that's based on the rules either as they are or as they're updated. And I think in this moment of still being a siloed state market, and we're all kind of approaching a very drastic change in what's going to happen nationally, that making a bunch of changes to something ahead of that without intentionally anticipating the results of that upcoming change in federal status is going to be a lot of work to probably not particularly useful ends in the long term, and that we'd be better off getting a real clear definition about canopy and then thinking about how do we update production limits in the context of export and really like get this canopy thing resolved quickly and simply, and then putting good work into like long-term development of production limits in a broader context.
I second what Micah said there. I think the easiest thing to do, and I agree with them too, that a lot of the problem was this inconsistency in how things were defined. I know we got letters saying a certain thing after we were told a certain thing before, and then we changed things, and we got letters saying never mind. I think the easiest action would just be to give a solid definition that can't, that, like you said, make the parameters tight enough, and then not really play around with canopy too much until we're really talking about interstate commerce and what we're going to do with that.
I like the idea that someone proposed earlier of doing it kind of like an experimental or trial basis where people can opt into trying the new canopy, just because, these do affect business plans that are 2, 3, 4 years long too.
Okay, well, looks like we're just about done with the session. So does, before we rejoin the larger group, are there any other thoughts?
I got super excited and thought you guys were talking about consumption when I first read this. And so like, a master brewer for beer shouldn't have to walk off the facility to sample the product. Is my take on that.
Okay, I think I'm going to stop the recording now for our room because we should be rejoining in any second here. So I'll go ahead and do that.